I started by drawing images frame by frame to create a proper animation. Learning about visual effects, I wanted to know the process in the beginning. I used to watch behind the scenes of major blockbuster Hollywood movies. Like you can see, oh, they're filming on the blue screen. What's blue screen? If you don't want to learn, your career is over. So you need to update yourself for me, every day. If you're interested in visual effects, you're gonna try almost everything. And once you try everything, you can pick one of your favorite.
Every fireball, every dragon, every magical sky we see on screen, someone had to imagine it, build it, and even bring it to life. In this episode of Ajyal Show, we open the door to the fascinating world of visual effects. Our guest today began his journey into visual effects by teaching himself the craft, but later went on to working on commercials, short films, features, and even the World Cup opening. We'll talk about creative workflow, software, challenges, and how advancements in technology are changing the game. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Zahib Masoud, to the show.
Thank you so much.
How are you feeling? You good?
I'm good.
Yeah. So I want to actually know about how you got into visual effects.
Whoa. It was way back when I started watching films with a lot of visual effects. It was with the first movie I watched was Jurassic Park, and then I watched Resident Evil and Harry Potter. And Harry Potter was a turning point for me because it has a very good visual effects at that time. So even now, when I create something, you can see a glimpse of Harry Potter. It's with the dark skies, with most of my environments are like with this kind of style, like the dark and very gothic kind of environments I create. So just because of that, I started learning about visual effects. And from that time, it was way back, but I used to draw frames, not working on a footage. So I think in 2012, I started working on a proper software on the footage. So it was a challenging because I don't know where to start at that time because there's no proper courses at that time. It was like it wasn't available online. So you have to go to those software forums and learn about visual effects. So I started by drawing frames like a bullet effects just by drawing images frame by frame. And I use Coral Draw, I used MS Paint, and then combine all the images inside the Movie Maker to create a proper animation for that bullet effect. So yeah, it was a challenging.
And so when you kind of had this passion kind of ignited from watching these movies, did you know at that point that you wanted to get into the actual field of working in visual effects at that point?
No, not at all. I never thought about that. I was doing this as a hobby on the side. And one day I met one of my friend. He was making a short film for DFI, and he wanted to ask me about certain shots. He was like, I want to try something. Do you have any idea how can I achieve this? I was like, it was a car crash scene. So I was like, yeah, we can do this. We can do this together. And we did it. And after that, he was like, I wanted to introduce you to one of the producer because I showed your work to the guy and he is really impressed. So that's how I went into this.
And how did you move from making pictures on Microsoft Paint and editing them on Windows Live Movie Maker to getting into visual effects on a larger scale? What did that look like?
I always like challenges, and that was kind of a challenge for me, like how people are doing the massive visual effects shots. Like I wanted to know the process in the beginning because I knew what I was doing, it's not the proper workflow and it shouldn't be done like this. So I used to watch behind the scenes of the major blockbuster Hollywood movies, like how they achieve certain shots and how they're doing, how they're using softwares. Back in the days, it wasn't that. It's hard to find the content, but still there are some shots like you can see. Oh, they're filming on the blue screen. What's blue screen? What's the chroma screen? Why they're using chroma screen? So I have to go into the software's forum and I have to read how it works and how can you create and how can you remove the key and replace the background basically.
And so you said that the first project that you worked on was a short film,
Yeah.
the one with DFI where you had to make a car crash. So could you tell me more about that experience? So how did you kind of start thinking about that? And how did it open the door to visual effects for you?
I mean, same thing was a challenge for me when he explained me, like when he was explaining me the story. I was like, there's one shot, I don't know how to achieve it. It's the car crash scene. So how can we do this? So I was like, let me figure this out for you. Just give me like few days. So I have to go back and I did my homework. I did some research and then I was like, let's do this. It's not a difficult shot to start with. And we pulled it together.
And I'm curious to know, so like, I don't have a lot of background, let's say, with VFX. And I heard now I've heard like Microsoft Paint and Windows Live Movie. I'm sure that's not what you used to make the car crash scene. So what was let's call it the evolution of Zohaib to a different program? Where did you start when it came to actually make the project come to life?
Yeah, I was watching a tutorial before I started doing this car crash scene, before I met the guy. And that, when I was doing some research on like how to do this, I heard about After Effects, Adobe After Effects. And one of my friend back in the days, he used to work for Qatar TV, and he was like, it's a very good software, you should use it. I was like, okay, how can I get it? I don't even know how to download it from it. Because I don't have any experience with Photoshop. Even now, I'm not so good at Photoshop, but he told me about the software and he was like, I can give you a trial version and you can work on it and you can learn. I was like, okay, let's get started. Like, let's do this. And after that, I did some basic like sky replacements and basic stuff with the particles. I was using stock footages a lot of the time, and I was doing like there was a lot of content available online. You can use it for learning. Like for example, a shot with the blue screen, you can use that. And you can go to the forum, and there's different, like there are so many stuff you can download and use them. So I downloaded a shot with the chroma screen, I removed it, I tried some compositing. At the same time, whenever there's something I don't understand, I have to go back and do my research on that, like how can we do this? And I have to go all this, like the software forum, how to use this effect, how to change values, how things gonna look after changing these values, how to add different effects on one layer inside After Effects. So things like this, I was doing this, and then I wasn't doing like most of the stuff I did was on all those test materials. So I wanted to try something on my footage, and then I met the guy, and then he gave me the opportunity.
Wow. If I was to put myself in your shoes, I've never really seen a car crash and thought about what happens to the metal when two cars hit. So my question to you is, when you're getting approached with a project and there's something that you have to simulate or create that you've never actually seen, what is the referencing process like?
First of all, it wasn't car hitting a car, it was car hitting a man.
Okay. I think it's even worse.
Yeah. So there are a lot of... back in the days, there were a lot of tutorials available, especially for the car crash. And whoever wants to start VFX, they want to start with the car crash because of the content available. And you don't really have to do a lot of stuff, to be honest, because the motion and the moment is very, very, very small where it's all happening. And because of the car, it has a lot of motion blur, so you're not going to see that many details. People prefer to do this. When you don't have motion blur, like motion blur is most of the time, it's like a cheat for a VFX artist to hide things, hide low quality renders, things like that. So, but yeah, it was a good way to learn. I mean, in that kind of scene, you don't have to simulate anything. You just need to add blood, and that's it.
And so when you actually receive a visual effects project, what is the first step that you take to actually begin executing it?
So there are different types of the steps. Like, for example, if you're working for a commercial, the steps are different. For music videos, the steps are different. For feature films, the steps are very different. So the easiest one is the commercial. It depends on, like, you have to, first of all, if you're asking me as a VFX supervisor, I have to discuss these things with the director and the DP, and then the colorist. To design the pipeline, definitely with the colorist, you have to think about the process of the filmmaking aspect, but it starts way before that, in pre-production, and then you decide and you go through different techniques. Like, you can actually explain them. There are different ways to achieve this shot, and how can there's a cheaper way, there's expensive way, and then you discuss the budgeting and the timeline, especially. So, for example, if you're starting with the commercial, the pipeline is very simple. It's a Rec 709 pipeline most of the time. Because of the deadline, you don't have you don't have much time to deliver the shots. And if you have a lot of CGI elements and there's only limited people are working on the shot, so you have to go through like a very simple pipeline. And if you're filming, if you're doing something like a feature film, the pipeline would be very different than Rec 709, because you have to send footage, you have to receive footage from the colorist, and then you have to send back the footage after adding the visual effects. So it needs a very different pipeline, which is ACES most of the time now. And ACES workflow, even inside the 3D software, when you're adjusting light, when you're adding materials to your objects, you have to add a ACES pipeline inside these softwares to work. And it's a very time consuming, but it's ideal.
So you mentioned also the word workflows a lot. So how do you define a workflow in the context of VFX?
It depends on your project, where you're delivering the project, first of all. If you are delivering for theaters, that's why you need a lot of color information in your footage, and that's why you go with the high-end pipeline. If it's going to the normal TV screens, for example, YouTube and social media, you really don't care about that much for the colors. So the pipeline would be very, very simple. And then you decide with the colorist, like, it's a waste of time to go with that high-end pipeline.
And so you said it starts out pre-production with the director and the DOP and the colorist. And then after that, when it comes to actually executing the visual effects themselves, is it the type of job that you do on your own, or do you have a team usually when you're doing kind of VFX?
As a VFX supervisor, it depends on the scale of the VFX. So if it's huge, for example, we just wrapped a film with a lot of visual effects, Sari and Amira. We're working with the different companies. And because it's impossible to work with one guy, so you have to discuss each and everything with all these companies before started filming. So you explain them the scenes, you discuss the ideas, you discuss the techniques, and then you find a solution. And then when you're all on the same page, and then you start filming.
And how would you say is the structure of a VFX team? So let's assume that you are working on a project where, let's say, you have your own team working on it. What is the structure? What are the different members of a VFX team?
So basically, it's you have multiple VFX artists. Some of them are responsible to create CGI computer-generated image inside the CGI software, such as Houdini, Maya, Blender, 3ds Max, Cinema 4D, and then you export all these computer-generated imagery to the compositing software, and there are other artists that are handling compositing part. So these artists are usually called compositors, and they blend all these images together, and then everything they will send back to the colorist.
And is compositing the only type of, let's say, visual effects, or are there other ones as well within?
No, there are different types of visual effects. For example, when you send your camera tracking data or a shot to a CGI team, there are different departments. There's a lighting department, there's a texturing department, there's an animation department, there's a rigging department, there's a 3D modeling department, there's a matte painting department, there's a different camera tracking department, there's a 2D camera tracking department, there's a 3D camera tracking department, if you're filming 3D stereoscopic, there's a stereoscopic department. So there are so many departments in this.
Wow, so that means that there's actually a lot of cogs in this machine, basically, of making visual effects. What would you say is one of the most challenging things about visual effects?
In all those departments?
Yeah.
I think the simulation part, the simulation artists, I forgot to mention that. So the simulation artists are very good, and it takes a lot of time because it needs a lot of computing power to generate a scene. So it's like you have to mimic real world physics in those softwares, and you're using computer algorithms and with all those physics engines. So you're mimicking real world physics. For example, if you want to create an ocean, you have to add a lot of details and you have to do a lot of processing to achieve that kind of look, because it's based on particles, it's based on gravity, it's based on air. So you should be very good with the physics.
So you also mentioned that there's so many like departments that are working together to bring something to life. How do these different departments collaborate with each other?
So it's also depends on the workflow. Sometimes it's basically, first of all, you need to start with the modeling. So for example, if it's in a shot, you're creating a dragon. So first of all, you need to sculpt and model the dragon inside ZBrush. It's a sculpting software. From ZBrush, you hand over your asset to the rigging artist, and he's gonna add bones and muscles to the dragon, and then you hand over this to an animator, to the animation department, and he's gonna add the animation and everything to the shot, and then you move this to the lighting and texturing department. So they'll add the texture and details in the dragon and set up the lighting according to your scene, and then you hand over this to the camera tracking team, and they will add everything in the same camera movement, and then they will render out and send it back to the compositor, and he's going to blend everything together for you.
Wow. I wouldn't have imagined that to make it a dragon, there's just so many people that would actually
and the fun part is sometimes it's not only one modeler, there are multiple modelers. Some of them are very good with the face, some of them are very good with the bodies. There's hard surface modelers, they design like tables, chairs, buildings, things like that. There are good sculptors, they're designing like creatures, animals, humans. So it's all different type of modelers.
Wow. Okay. So you said that, for example, that you kind of really looked up to Harry Potter and Jurassic Park when you were young. I'm curious to know, out of not the things that you've watched, but the things that you've created and made, is there a particular project that you are just the most proud of?
I mean, all of my projects were like fun projects, and I love all of them, to be honest. But yeah, there's some projects. It wasn't a creative design in that project, but it was like challenging part was virtual production. So it was the beginning, like when we were doing World Cup opening video, and I thought about providing this facility to the director and introducing this first time in the region, in Doha especially, using Unreal Engine. So that was a very challenging thing for me to start something different. And I'm super proud of that moment. Even now, whenever I watch those clips, it looks really like amazing. And that I'm proud of that, actually. And that's, even now, I'm very much into virtual production, and things are evolving every day. They introduce physics now in virtual production, and it's very complicated now, which is why I love this virtual production now.
And for people who don't know, how would you define virtual production? What does that mean?
I mean, there are different types of virtual production, actually. So virtual production, what we did was using an LED volume, because there is a difference between when you're using chroma screen and you're using LED volumes. So most of the DPs now and the directors prefer LED volumes because they can actually see what they're filming. They can adjust lighting according to the background. Because if you're using blue screen or green screen, you won't be able to see the background, how it's going to look in the end. So they prefer this process now. And everybody's now building their own virtual production stages. So basically, it's an LED backdrop you're using. And you're actually creating a content. For example, you're creating an environment, and you're projecting that environment in that LED volumes. And your foreground is going to be the practical set. So, and your camera, your real camera is connected to your virtual camera inside your virtual environment. So if you move your camera in real world, your virtual camera will move and follow the exact same X and Y and Z movement. So it's going to look like the same environment when you move the camera.
Would you say that introducing LED volumes is going to change kind of the creative workflow of visual effects in terms of the process of actually creating those effects?
Yeah, you're adding one more step now, which is making it a little bit more complicated, because there's so many things happening before you start filming in virtual production. Like you have to calibrate your LED panels. You have to check the colors. Are they okay? You need to check the pitch, the pixel pitch of the LED volumes, the distance between each pixel. The closer, the better. You have to do a lot of testing before that. That's why nowadays there are people calling it in-camera VFX, because once you film it, you don't have to worry about the backplate anymore. It's gonna stay there. So there's a lot of preparation. There are a lot of tests. There are a lot of tests when it comes to gaming engines. Most of the time, it's always gaming engines to use, because these are the real-time rendering engines available at the moment. So, and Unreal Engine is on the top at the moment.
So a lot of people, when they think of VFX, the thing that comes to their mind is usually like fantasy and like, you know, dragons and everything. But I'm more interested in things like, how do you make water that looks real? Or how do you make real life things that aren't actually there look real? So can you tell me a little bit about the process of making things like water?
It's a bit complicated process. It's usually the physics engines and the computers. You need a very strong computer, a strong machine to do the simulation. So first of all, when you go into a simulation software, that is also a 3D software, most of the time it's Houdini. You go into the software, there's a setup of each and every single thing. You don't have to start from the beginning. So for example, if you want to create an ocean, you can get some nodes already prepared to create an ocean. For fire, for smoke, for clouds, they're built in plugins, they're built in nodes that you can use to generate all these things. And after that, once you know, like you want to create a water, it depends on, are you creating a lake or a river or an ocean or an infinite ocean? And what exactly you're creating in the ocean? Is there an interaction in the ocean? There's a whale jumping outside the ocean, or what exactly you're doing? So if it's just an ocean, the workflow is a bit simpler. And you can do this in other softwares as well. You can do this in Blender. You can do this in Maya. You can do this even in 3ds Max. But if you're combining multiple physics, then you need a very good physics engine. And that is, at the moment, it's Houdini at the moment.
So you mentioned a lot of physics, about when you're trying to simulate these things. And my question is that, given that you're someone who's self-taught, how was it like kind of learning and trying to understand? What were the things that you did to understand these parts of it? Because it feels like a very technical subject.
Yeah. So when I started with the compositing. So when I achieved the compositing, like I knew like I can do compositing on anything now. So it wasn't a challenge for me anymore. So I took another step and started something in CGI to create animation, to rig the character, to do the motion, how it behaves, things like that. And after that, I was like, okay, that's done. What's next? And that was the simulation part. And then I started working, like I started doing simulation. My first project was a short film when I was doing only sky replacement. So it's a very good story. So I was hired to do sky replacements only. And there was another company that was responsible to do, because the story has a very good, like it has like 40% of the film was in the ocean, especially in the climax. So that was another company was handling the simulation part. I was doing the sky replacements. So I got only like 20% of the film, and they were handling 80% of the film. And at the same time, when I saw their early test for the simulation, I was like, I want to try something as well. Because for the sky replacement, I was like very confident about it. I was like, oh, it's nothing. It's not going to take much time. So I finished my shot. I started working on the water simulation, and I was generating better ocean than the team. So I showed it to the director and the producer. I was like, okay, this is the test I did. And they were really impressed. And they're like, okay, we'll give you some shots for the water simulation. And it was still 50-50 we were doing. But then there was a shot with the interaction. So you can see the waves are hitting the boat. And I was like, okay, the first part was okay. Now let's try something different. So I started doing this. And I got these shots as well. I did a very good job in this one. And they really liked my tests. And then they were like, okay, let's do 80% or 90% of the film. And in the end, it was only one shot that they were doing, and I was doing the 99% of the movie, and I replaced that as well.
I guess this is where dedication really gets you. Like if you're really someone who's trying to learn the craft well, I think gives hope for a lot of people. I'm curious to know, just because you started out in compositing and then you started doing simulations, is there one you like more than the other?
Yes. I love simulations. Not anymore, but if you're asking me the simulation and compositing, I'll pick simulation. But you ask me the simulation and virtual production, I'll pick virtual production, because virtual production is still in the early stage. And it started, I think, from Mandalorian. And it's been only 5 years now, I think.
How do you predict seeing the change that virtual production is going to be making on creating visual effects for commercials, short films, and features and other video formats?
At the moment, if you're asking me about the region, there are some good XR studios, virtual production studios, then people are using it for commercials now. But it's not on that scale. But hopefully in the next 2 years, people's going to use a lot. Because, as I said, director of photography, they love seeing what they're filming, and directors as well. You just need a little bit of knowledge, like the limitation of virtual production. If you know the limitations, you can do a lot of the stuff now.
And like I work in marketing, and like the closest maybe thing that I can think of as to visual effects is maybe like animating, and it's always the thing that takes probably the longest time in any creative process for us. And I wanted to know, like from a video and film perspective, what is the timeline for creating visual effects? Like, is it something that you have to account for long periods of time? And then how does that change depending on what it is you're actually creating?
So first of all, you need to know like how much time do you have when the content is releasing. So, and based on that, how many shots are there? Is it doable? Is it not doable? You need to talk to the director. It's something, if it's not realistic, if somebody wants to add like 100 shots in 1 month, it's sometimes impossible to do something like that, because you need a lot of prep time and do R&D for, like, it also depends on what kind of VFX you're adding. If it's just a sky replacement or if it's just a compositing, it's okay, you can do it. But if you're relying on computers and the machines to do simulations, then you need time. For example, water simulation takes days to simulate. And it's not the final simulation, it's just an R&D. So if you have a couple of shots like that, you don't have much time to do something like that. But that means the timeline is unrealistic. So you need to talk to the director and the executive producer about the timeline first, if it's doable or not doable.
And if you could share with us, maybe I'm curious to know also, what's the longest duration of a visual effects project that you've done?
Okay, so the longest one took, I think, a year. And it was a Iranian feature film, Orca. It was one of the best projects I did in terms of feature films. And there was like since the name is Orca, definitely you see Orca in the film. So, and that's why, because there was sometimes you have to wait because things are in the edit. They're editing at the same time, but you'll get your time to do your R&D at the same time. But you're not going to finish your work until you get the locked shots. So at the same time, you start working on the preparation, you can start working on the models, you can start doing animation, you can work on the side. And once you get the shot with the proper duration, with the proper camera movement, you can start working on the tracking, you can start planning the shot after it's locked. But before that, you can start preparing the assets.
And then out of all the departments that you mentioned within the VFX, from the modeling to, the rest of them, is there one of them in particular that takes longer in comparison to the other ones?
Yeah, simulations. Yeah. Because you're relying on machines. You can't do anything. You add the values and now let computer do the job for you. So you have to wait. Sometimes you have to wait for days. And then when it's done, you're not going to see the motion properly. You can see the motion, you can see the particles, but you have to render that simulation data first. So then you have to turn these particles into a geometry, into a mesh, and then you can render this geometry. And rendering will take time. And you have to wait. There's no way you can do something.
The first thing that actually comes to my mind is I wonder how it would be like to deal with a crash or something if you're relying on machines. Is that something that actually happens?
Yes, you definitely need a backup plan. Sometimes I work with plan B, C, D, E. If something goes wrong, because I'm simulating that scene in another machine as well and at home as well. Sometimes it's like that. So it's like you have to work like an octopus. So I was simulating a scene in the office. I was simulating a scene in the backup machine. And then I take all the data. I went back home. I started simulation, the same thing again. And nobody knows about this machine, that there is a plan C as well. But you have to work like that. Yeah. And the crash happens a lot of time, especially when it comes to simulation. Sometimes Windows just update, and when you come in the morning and you see it's updated and it's restarted and everything you did was on hold now. So you have to start over again and you just wasted a couple of hours. But the good thing is you're simulating something on other machine and you can still get the data and you can save a lot of time if you're working with multiple backup plans.
On the topic of machines, I feel like a lot of times now when we hear the word machine, a lot of people think of AI. And I'm curious to know how you feel about AI being used in visual effects. Are you excited about it, or are you maybe more cautious about what it's going to do for us?
I think it's helping a lot, to be honest. It's not going to take our jobs away, first of all. It's going to make our jobs easier, especially when it comes to masking and rotoscoping, frame by frame. AI is helping a lot, and you're saving a lot of days. No offense to the rotoscoping artists. It's still in the early stages. But yes, and sometimes when you're doing deepfakes, you're relying on AI a lot, but it's not gonna take your jobs away, and it's there to help you. All these plugins are actually help you to save time.
And so you said that right now your biggest passion, maybe let's say if it's fair to say in the VFX, is now gearing towards virtual production. And of course, it's great to hear that you've been, moving from animating images to then compositing and then simulation and then virtual production. So my question to you is, how does your learning curve towards virtual production now look like? So how are you exploring kind of that world and learning more about it?
It depends. Yeah, I'm learning. I'm relying on director's treatment. Sometimes I go to the director and suggest them something crazy, like let's add something challenging to the script, so I can get something to work on. Otherwise, if you're repeating the same environments, like if you're just creating environments, it's not that challenging. For example, last time we added fire in the virtual production, like in the virtual world, in the LEDs. So, and we did that successfully. And then I recently did a commercial for a museum. And the challenging part was not to create a fire, to create fire at 50 frames per second, which was extremely challenging for all of us. But we did a good job, and we got the best results.
So you talked about one of the projects that was quite challenging for you, which was to create fire in 50 frames per second. So when you end up reaching a point where you have to try and make something maybe that you have not made before that's difficult, how do you begin in kind of decoding, let's say, the problem and then figuring out the solution for it?
Okay, that's a very good question. But before that, I usually work on the backup plan. That's how I work. So if I'm not confident about something I can achieve and I don't find any documents to achieve something like that, I go to the director, I talk to them directly that this is what you're asking me, I've never done this before, let's do some test. If you can offer me some test, I can give you some results within this time frame. But if there's no time available for doing these tests, then this is a backup plan. So my backup plan was just render out the fire in 50 frames and play it on the screen instead of playing real time. So that was my plan. So usually whenever I see something is not working, I go to the director and ask for how much time do we have? Is there enough time for to do multiple tests on this one? Or to increase the time on the test? If there is no time available, then there should be another plan.
And how do you stay on top of making sure that you're up to date and you're kind of learning the new techniques of virtual production, given that it's still relatively new?
I watch a lot of movies with the heavy VFX, and then I go and see the behind the scenes, how they're doing things. And when you're updating your softwares, you can keep up with the other artists in the forums, you can talk about different problems, and you can update yourself like this. It's not as difficult, but you need to stay in the same game. Like, if you don't want to learn, your career is over. So you need to update yourself for me, every day. I was watching a VFX breakdown in the morning, and I watched 3-4 breakdowns every day to see what exactly they're doing. Are they using virtual production? Are they using green screen? Why they're using blue screen? The difference between the virtual production environments. What is the difference between Unreal Engine and there are some new engines coming out this year? Why they're using these engines? Why they're not using the old one? What's the difference? So when you're learning all these things, you can update yourself with the industry.
One of the things I'm fascinated most about regarding your journey is how it's something that you've taught yourself how to do, and it started as a hobby and then now has evolved to something that you do full time, which I think is really cool. And I would love to kind of hear from you firsthand. What would be kind of your advice for someone that's just beginning into the world or the realm of visual effects?
First of all, it depends on what exactly you want to do. Are you interested in blending images? Then you have to go to the compositing section, the compositing department, which is good for you because there's different types of visual effects, and it's very difficult to pick one. So if you're good at sculpting, you need to try almost everything. All these artists in the world, they don't stick to what they're doing. They're doing compositing, they're doing modeling. Even if they don't do simulations, there's so many stuff online they can use as a stock footage and use it for compositing purposes. And they can actually test almost everything. I know there are so many Blender artists that started with modeling stuff. Now they're doing simulations. Because if you are interested in visual effects, you're going to try almost everything. And once you try everything, you can pick one of your favorite things.
So would you advise that people be more specific maybe at the beginning? And then maybe after having maybe some experience in one aspect, maybe? Because I feel like the nice thing about kind of your experience and maybe something that I think a lot of people can learn from is that you're able to kind of dip your toe into different fields. And
Yeah, I mean, it depends. If you have a lot of patience, you can do simulations as well. Because simulations is like you have to wait. I know so many people, they don't like to wait. So they prefer doing compositing. So that's how you pick, like what exactly you want to do, how much time you want to spend. Plus, with the AI now, things are evolving. You can generate 3D models now by just hitting a prompt. So it all depends and it's changing. I don't want to suggest something that is actually, it's going to go away in the next few years. Like modeling now, if you're doing modeling, then you have to do some adjustment. Like with the new photogrammetry, when you scan a 3D object, you don't have to create a model. You can just scan it. And there's so many models available online that you can download free. So even if you're doing modeling, it depends on what kind of modeling you're doing. I prefer doing sculpting, creature design. It's much more fun now, and I don't see AI doing things like that. You can definitely do some retouches with AI. You can create a base mesh with AI, but you always need a human.
And you said that sometimes one of the limitations that you have, for example, could be actually the technology that you're using, depending. So for people who are actually starting out who might not have maybe access to resources that will allow them to really like try things out, what would you advise them?
First of all, if you don't have an LED panels and if you want to try virtual production, you can use your own TV. It's not an issue. There are plugins available online free of cost. Unreal Engine is free software. You can use that. All the plugins like for the display, all these plugins are free inside Unreal Engine. You can sync it with your TV. If you don't have TV, if you want to try something different, you can work with the projector. And if you get all these things, you can try out something on the proper LED volumes. But yes, you can do with the TV. And if you want to try simulations, Blender is a free software. You can try simulations on that software, and you can start the basics of simulation, and then you can migrate to another software, with the better physics engine. And for example, if you're modeling something, all these 3D softwares are for the learning editions, most of them are free of cost. So you can start working on that, and you can start your career.
Wow. And so how would you say is the balance between creativity and the technical aspects of visual effects? Do you think that there's more maybe technicalities over creativity, or do they kind of play or work together?
You need both, to be honest. You need a balance of both in this. So if you're good at technical side and you're not that good at the creative side, you won't be able to generate all those frames. It's hard for you. Sometimes you sit with you will get frames from the art director, and you get frames from references from the VFX supervisor. And you're good at mimicking those frames, but still you need a balance of both, in my point of view.
And would you say that it's necessary for people to actually study VFX? Or do you think it's enough maybe for people to be able to self-teach themselves to get to where they want to be?
Most of the people are self-taught. So it depends on your passion. It depends on your hobby. And it doesn't matter what exactly you learn from the past. It always depends on your show reel, that what can you create in the world of visual effects. So if you have a very strong show reel, there you can get a lot of opportunities.
And for those people who don't know what a show reel is, what is a show reel?
It's like a portfolio in a video form. So you can just showcase your work. It doesn't need to be a high-end commercial or a feature film. You can do your test and you can put all these tests into your show reel. It's a video. You just have to add. And it needs to be short, by the way. You don't have to bore the audience. Like, it's better to showcase your stuff around minute and a half. That's it. And you just showcase, like, you can show the breakdowns, how you did the compositing, how you're doing the simulations.
And what do you think sets apart, maybe like from a hiring perspective, what sets apart normal VFX artists from a really good VFX artist? What can make people stand out?
It's the quality of your work. It's the detail of your work. It's the complexity of the shot. So if the shots are static, anybody can do sky replacement. Like the junior artists, they usually start with the basic stuff. But you can actually see the complicated stuff in the show reel or in the shot that somebody did a very good job. And it's very obvious with the quality. You can clearly see that.
If you were to go back in time and be able to meet younger Zohaib, what advice would you give him?
I wish I could. To be honest with you, I'm really happy where I am right now. And the advice would be to start simulations earlier than I started. It's just 1 year earlier, probably. That's not a big difference. But yeah, I wanted to start at this so I can start virtual production earlier than when I did. So it's gonna affect all the progress I made. And instead of relying on some other software, some free softwares, I would advise myself to use Houdini at that time. So because it's most of the films, they're doing simulations inside Houdini at the moment. But back in the days, I was using some other softwares. I didn't know about using Houdini. I didn't know about the differences. So if I get the chance to go back in time, I would definitely advise myself to use a proper physics engine.
And so you said that a lot of the times you were relying on resources online to help you figure out like how to kind of start and learn. And I would love it if you could share, like maybe right now as someone who knows a lot about the field, what are some resources that people can rely on to make sure that they kind of can teach themselves how to do what you're doing?
The most of the time, like, it depends on what software you're using. So if you're using, for example, if you're using Houdini, you can go to the forum of Houdini and you can write your problem, what exactly you want to troubleshoot, and you can see the problems that the different people are. They're facing the same problem, and then you can communicate with them directly.
Seems like a very collaborative field. Like I think even for me, I've heard before that there's a lot of like open like source files, I believe they call them, where a lot of people can kind of share and use those resources together. And my question to you is, given that it is such a collaborative kind of experience, it sounds like, how do you see the VFX space evolving in the region? Do you feel like as time is moving on now, or over the next decade, that we're going to be seeing a lot more maybe VFX artists come out? And how would you think we can kind of motivate kind of this field to also go into its growth?
I think it's growing slowly, but I think it's growing in the region. I don't want to talk specifically about the country. I think there's so many young artists at the moment in the country. They're working, they're trying new things in Blender, which is very good. It's a very good start, by the way. And I've seen some of the work, and it's amazing. It's way better than mine. And I was really impressed. And I think in the next few years, we'll see a lot of artists. You'll see a lot of artists in the region. At the moment, most of the artists, they're coming from different countries. But at the same time, for example, we are doing a lot of internship. And I think within the next few years, you will see some good VFX artists in the country as well.
Then how valuable would you say are kind of experiences like internships or kind of being like, I want to say quote unquote, like an apprentice almost to VFX artists actually working on the job?
It all depends on what exactly you want to do when it comes to internship. Most of the people don't really prefer visual effects as an internship. Whenever they come to me and I explain them things and they just ran away. I don't know why. It looks difficult, but it's fun, to be honest. It's more fun than any other department. No offense to anyone, but I think it's more fun when it comes to Unreal Engine. You don't have to wait for anything. Rendering is fast, real time. You can do a lot of stuff. And I hope if I get a chance to train people in the region, in the country, I prefer them to use Unreal Engine now. It's a gaming engine, free of cost. You can do a lot of stuff. There's so many free assets available. And you can do whatever you want to do inside the software. It's a huge gaming engine.
Yeah. And last but not least, I want to say, how valuable do you think is it to make sure that you take time consistently to experiment around with all of these softwares?
Usually I do this in my free time when I'm not working on any commercial or feature film. Even if I'm on vacation, I have some time dedicated to this in a day. Where it's not like I'm doing this, it's because it's my hobby. And whenever I got bored, I just open my phone and just try to do some research on something. For example, if I watch a movie, and sometimes, like whenever I watch a movie, I think back in my head, something is going on, like how they did this. And after watching the movie, I do my research on like what exactly they did. If there's a breakdown available, it helps me a lot. If it's not available, then I do my own test. So that's how I'm learning and growing at the same time.
That's so cool. Zohaib, I want to thank you very much for your time and
So much
for your
having me.
insight. And I think for kind of the inspirational spirit you bring to the table. I think for me, as someone who had seen visual effects as something as super complicated and technical, one, it's brought me 10 times, 11 billion times more respect for the fact that you actually started out with your determination to get to where you are now. And I'm super excited for everyone to hear this and kind of be motivated to go on the same journey and to learn a lot about VFX and the future of VFX and especially virtual production.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much.